Hi, this is Sherry, and I have the pleasure and honor of having David Morgan from silverinvestor.com. Absolute silver expert. He keeps ahead of everything going on with the metals, and we're having a very fast conversation because he brought something to my attention about the Fed conference that was sponsored by the IMF on April 17th and what Governor of the Fed, Jeremy Stein, said. Hi, David. Are you there?
I'm here, Sherry.
Thank you so much for doing this last minute interview with me. You sent me this information this morning, and I think, with Cyprus, as we know now, we have the going Cyprus or going Iceland, two very different things there, from the freedom from the banks and debt slaves to being complete debt slaves and having all your money taken away. And everybody here has been saying, "Oh, it won't happen in the U.S." and people have disregarded what happened in Cyprus. A lot of people haven't paid attention. Can you tell me what this Governor Jeremy Stein said and why it is very important?
Yes, you can. I picked it up, I think, on the 18th, maybe it was the 19th. These days are blurring together. There's so much activity in the economy overall, and of course in the metals markets as well, with this recent smashing that's taken place. Anyway, I read the whole thing, and I highlighted part of it and sent it out on my Twitter feed, and I think that's what I sent you initially. Regardless, I think I'll just quote a couple of people who have already been through this, so I'm kind of retracing ground that's already been turned over. But Eric King interviewed Jim Sinclair on this. Again, I already tweeted it out. I don't know who went first. I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about what it means. And Eric asked Sinclair about this speech. It's important that financial institutions do fail, blah, blah. Perhaps more to the point, that too big to fail. If SIFI does fail, I have little doubt that private investors will in fact bear the losses, even if this leads to an outcome that is more costly to society than we would like. And Sinclair says, and I'll quote this one, what he is saying is that the potential for losses are so large, and he's referring to the more than $1 quadrillion in legacy over-the-counter markets for derivatives, that nobody could create that much money. So what's pending now is so large that these statements from Stein are confirmation that Cyprus is in fact the blueprint in the United States for coming financial failures, ... And that's from Sinclair. I don't necessarily quote others all the time, but Jim is known as Mr. Gold. I was aware of Mr. Sinclair back in the first bull market in the 70s. It peaked in 1980. Heard him speak, actually, very early on. And I don't know what else I can say, Sherry, other than yes, it's absolutely a fact that Canada, the U.S., most nation states, and I haven't looked at them all, but definitely in North America, meaning the U.S. of A. and Canada, do have, in fact, the ability to do something similar to Cyprus if they so choose. So this is something that every American ought to be out in the streets, screaming, or as a metaphor, at least doing something. If not getting their money out of the bank, at least writing a letter or getting on a radio show or doing something. And yet it seems that the overall attitude is one of complacency.
Oh, always here. Just like it's amazing that gold and silver is sold out like around in the way of different places in the world, except for the U.S. because the people are so, I don't know, they're so dumbed down or something. I don't know. But you were mentioning Sinclair, but what you sent me, didn't Sinclair get this information with the same thing that you sent me right from the Governor Jeremy Stein of the Federal Reserve's mouth, in the way of saying that they will take it to the creditors, which are take it from the creditors and shareholders, which the creditors are the depositors of the bank.
Correct. Yeah. I'm looking at it right off. When I found out about this, I went right to the federalreserve.gov website and read it verbatim. And the part you're referring to, let me see if I can find it here. It's right in, I think, the second paragraph of this, and basically saying that if it were to fail, that they would. Okay, here it is. I'll start in the middle of the.
And he
It's
says
the
with
second paragraph.
certainty.
Yeah, if SIFI were to fail, the losses would fall on its shareholders and creditors, and taxpayers would have no exposure. So the taxpayers wouldn't have exposure, but the creditors are, as you say, the depositors of the bank. So the shareholders of the banks, let's say it's B of A as an example, or XYZ Bank. I don't want to name any particular bank, but it could be any of them. Were to fail, the loss would fall on the shareholders. So that stock, B of A or whomever, would go in the toilet, so to speak. And the creditors are the people that have deposits at the bank. So they're the ones that would take the loss. The people that are, stakeholders in that particular bank and everyone that has a deposit with them. It doesn't say the exposure, but it would be significant, I'm sure. He says in that same paragraph, a second aim is that the failure must not impose significant spillovers to the rest of the financial system in the form of a contagion effect, fire sales, widespread credit crunches, and the like. Well, just the opposite is probably true. In other words, if a big,
Right.
large, not too big to fail bank did fail, then it would cause a bank run. In my view, people would say, "Well, B of A is going down. I wonder how Wells Fargo is," or name any bank you care to name that's a big, well-known
JP
money
Morgan?
center. JP Morgan. Okay, we can do that one. That seems to be everyone's favorite.
Goldman Sachs?
Yeah.
Well,
So, yeah,
I
go ahead.
have to say, there's a few words before that you mentioned that he says before that, which I think people really need to understand because from what I'm reading, what you sent me, it says one goal is to get to the point where all market participants understand with certainty that if a large SIFI were to fail, the losses would fall on its shareholders and creditors. He's saying with certainty. That is no question mark. That's no, oh, geez, is there a misunderstanding? That is absolute with certainty. That's big. That's a big statement right there too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to read the whole thing. I think I'll read the
No,
next
but
paragraph because it's only two sentences. So, he asked a rhetorical question in his speech. So he's speaking as he says, so where do we stand? Meaning, where does the Fed stand? And he says, I believe two statements are simultaneously true. We've made considerable progress with respect to the SIFI since the financial crisis, second sentence, and we're not yet at a point where we should be satisfied. So if you read between the lines there, what he's saying is, yeah, we've papered this thing over so far and it seems to be holding, but we're not convinced it's going to work. I mean, those are my interpretation. You can interpret it any way you want. The black and white, statement is there for everyone to read. Just go to federalreserve.gov and ask for the April 17th speech regarding large financial institutions. So this is scary stuff. This is, very important for people to know. As I've often said, and I haven't said in a while, but regardless about what my purpose is here, and to teach and empower people to understand the benefits of an honest financial system. That's my mission statement. But money transcends everything. I mean, everyone, regardless of their race, their color, their political affiliation, their sex, their whatever. Everyone's concerned about their money. Everyone, because that's the way a modern society moves. You do a job of some type, you get money, and money is the universal situation where everyone can use it to do whatever they want: entertainment, food, shelter, on and on. So it is something that's important to everybody, unless you're absolutely totally, subsistence on your own, which there are few, but so few they're not worth counting in a way. And this is why it's so important, because this goes to the heart of everyone and concerns everyone. And yet, again, I'll repeat myself, it seems that there's just this overlying complacency, even when it's in print, it's been stated. But, I mean, I don't know who has the larger following. I probably Mr. Sinclair has far greater following than me, and I'm not concerned about that at all. I'm concerned about getting the word out. And I think that there are enough of us that are in I'll call it the honest money movement, which is what it used to be called, uh, to get this
Okay.
information out on the net, like you're doing, Sherry. And so it's continuing in what we used to call the honest money movement. I mean, this is imperative information, and I think that everyone needs to be aware of it. And I think people like you, Sherry, are very important. Excuse me, the bloggers out there and radio shows like this on the internet. You're not going to hear this on the mainstream news, or if you do, it's going to be rather convoluted. That there was an IMF meeting that took place on the 17th of April to anticipate the you know, to anticipate a solution to a large bank problem. Okay. Well, that would imply saying it in that manner that, our leaders are there and ready to help us if something
Yeah,
terrible.
they're being proactive.
Yeah. So it would, and they're not lying. They're just not stating the absolute fact that you have to dig down and get off the internet. You're not going to really hear that, if a bank fails, they're going to take the depositors' money. Now, they don't say how much. They don't say, what the restrictions are, and because there are a lot of things around the Cyprus fiasco, depending on what the size of the deposit was, and on and on. But nonetheless, the point is that they took money that wasn't theirs.
Well, also,
It
didn't you?
was. Let me back up. I want to restate that. I just said they took money that wasn't theirs. That's not true. In the Morgan report, a month before the Cyprus ordeal, I didn't have any foresight this is going to happen. But I quoted Eric Sprott at the Silver Summit saying a bank investment, money in the bank is not a safe investment as far as he's concerned. And I quoted that, and I went on and explained to readers of the Morgan report why he's correct. And when you put a deposit in the bank, that is the bank's money, not yours. And I emphasized that in the report, in the Morgan report. And again, I didn't know, but bang, bang, a few weeks later, here comes Cyprus. It proves the point. So when people think it's their money, no, if you look at the contract that they signed, that they call a signature card, which most people think has nothing to do with the contract, it has only a way for the bank to check their signature. Baloney. That's the contract that says all this money that you think is yours is ours. And so I want to make that very clear, Sharon. I'm sorry I misstated it. Your money. No, you think it's your money in the bank, but it's their money. So what they're really doing is saying that, the creditor, you, that has a deposit at that bank, if there was a failure, the losses would fall on the shareholders, the owners of the bank, and the creditors. And that's that simple. And it's imperative that people understand this, because it's not time to be complacent. It's time to take action.
Well, also you have the FDIC that supposedly, do you know your money's safe in the bank because it's FDIC insured up to 250,000. Well, the fact is, the FDIC only has $25 billion or $23 billion to cover how many trillions? I mean, come on, it's not going to happen. And one of the other things, which I think last year, the year before, I did a research and found out that everybody that owns stocks, the stocks are not yours. The stocks, the biggest corporation in the world you never hear about that has more money is actually the Federal Reserve. All stocks go into the Federal Reserve's name when you buy them through your broker. That's another whole story. But in other words, when you put all the things together, which I'm going to, the bank, money deposits in the bank, stocks, any of those different investments, including property, actually, really, what's the best investment for people right now in reality? Go ahead.
Well, well, the best investment in reality is the money that's outside the system, outside the matrix, and that's physical gold, physical silver, and probably both. I mean, they're the two most powerful precious metals in existence, and they have been that way for centuries. I do want to go back. Excuse me, got a little cough going this morning. One more thing on about Sinclair on this posting that Eric did on King World News, and so Eric asked him, so the intention is to Cyprus, the United States? And Claire answers yes, no question about it. Then later on in this blog that Eric put up, a few paragraphs down, he talks about, if there's a failure in the futures market, and he says, and this is Sinclair, written by Eric, so hopefully he's got it totally accurate. I'm sure he probably does. The truth is that when we take out these future markets on a failure, gold is going to 50,000, not 3,500, 50,000. We are in the midst of a failure right here, right now. That's what this is all about. The takedown has been the ultimate can kick. Now, I'm not going to be that bold. Um, but obviously, if there were a failure somewhere in the you know chain of events for physical metal, it certainly would up the paper price almost instantly. That's my view. We have to wait and see. I don't know. I'm pretty neutral on this, Sharon. I want to go on record on your blog saying this because my sources and they're pretty good. And I have a call in the first thing Monday morning. The first thing I'm going to do Monday morning, I'll be talking to one of the largest refineries in Europe to see what their capacity is, what their situation is. How much is stored, how much is being demanded. Are they having trouble meeting demand and that type of thing. I've already got preliminary indications from them already that on the European side of things, it really is not that tight for the commercial bars. Now, remember, we're talking 1,000-ounce silver bars that are LBMA approved, and we're talking 400-ounce gold bars. So we're talking commercial, but still, all product pretty much stems from those entities, those physicalities. In other words, every Silver Eagle out there usually started as a 1,000-ounce bar. It was melted down. It was turned into a silver plate. It was extruded, and then it was cut, stamped into a planchette, and then it was sent to the mint and pressed out. So we have to look at the total chain to be really sure. And I'm not discounting anything that Sinclair would say. I certainly would be, that would be a big mistake on my part. What I am indicating is that from my sources that I haven't finished making my determination, I'm not that concerned yet about the commercial bar side of both gold and silver. Not to say that we aren't in a situation that this has been oversold. I think they both have. In other words, there isn't a doubt in my mind that the amount of physical that exists hasn't been hypothecated again and again and again. It would not, cannot, and will never cover the amount of paper that's out there floating around. I mean, I know that's a fact, but yet that's very hard to prove. And it just comes down to how does it unfold. And I don't think anyone knows how it will unfold, but we're certainly at a point right now where what the banks are doing and stating in the public domain, it's time for a wake-up call. So if you don't have any physical metal, I think now it's imperative that you get in line and get some. And as you said, Sherry, regardless of what the overall commercial supply is, it doesn't matter in a way because it matters to you. And if you get in line in Hong Kong or some of the Asian countries to get it, you're going to have a long wait because they're running out in the retail market. And it's getting very tight in the United States and some in the retail world as well. There's a lot of dealers that basically are not able to deliver, and the ones that claim that they will are out 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or longer. So we're seeing something we saw before in 2008 during the financial crisis, and this may be the one. I don't know yet. But prepare early. In other words, even if it isn't the one, you would rather have the metal in your hand than not.
Especially at the prices right now that they hit. Now, when you mentioned the $50,000 gold, I think I've seen something where silver way up there. Now that is the actual physical compared to the paper. I mean, isn't the falling apart of the whole financial system of the fake of the paper market where it is hypothecated, it is all of that, won't that pretty much, am I right that that'll collapse and that won't be the real price of gold? Whereas, even though right now gold and silver is on the goes by the COMEX market price, wouldn't then the premiums be something of the gold price might be 900, but the premium price is actually 20,900. I mean,
Well,
is that possible?
yeah, well, surely there could be a big spread between what the paper price is and what the physical metal is. Certainly, that's already taken place, and it was widespread at the 2008 crisis, and it's pretty widespread right now as we speak. They did come back, and a lot of people thought that delta, that difference, was going to maintain, and it didn't. The physical price came back down and matched the paper price actually pretty quickly. I wrote an article about it and how to arbitrage it. And so back when this happened in the 2008 crisis, I wrote an article about arbitraging it. And my view was that the paper price would come back to the physical price, and it did. There were others that thought that the physical price would stay at a huge premium to the paper price, but no, they came back in line with each other. But there could be a point in the future. In fact, I'm on record from years and years ago saying that, at some point there will be a break between the physical reality of silver and gold and the paper fiction or the derivative price. And and that will take place in my view. And how close are we? I don't know. Certainly, we're closer now than probably we've ever been. I mean, gold, I think you can make even a stronger case in some instances than silver, from the aspect that you look at Germany and they're asking for their gold back, and the Fed's saying, 7 years, and Texas wants their gold back from the Fed, and they're saying, no, no, no. There hasn't been a real audit, a physical audit of the Federal Reserve. I'm aware of the fact that the Inspector General, whoever it is, does a written audit of the gold in Fort Knox every year, but that's just looking at the books. That's looking at a piece of paper that says that there's this gold, and if you study that like Mike Maloney has, and I don't have time to go into it, and I don't want to misstate it, but basically their term gold is almost meaningless because it's such a broad-based definition. It covers swapped, leased, deep storage, and all this other definitions of gold. Well, gold is gold. Come on, let's get real here. But when they do the audit, they look at this word gold and what all its meanings, and then they say, well, we've done this audit. Well, they just looked at a piece of paper and said, yep, piece of paper says there's that much there. They don't go in and physically look at every bar. They don't weigh it. They don't assay it and that type of thing. That type of audit hasn't taken place since the early 50s. And that's the kind of audit that, Ron Paul was asking for. That's the kind of audit that the population of the American citizenry deserve.
Right. But you know what? People are complacent about that. Let me ask you something. You mentioned the Texas. I know I hadn't followed up on it. The University of Texas had bought, what was it, $1 billion worth, and the governor Perry was wanting to get it back. Are you saying from the Fed and get it down there? Are you saying the Fed has refused them?
It's my understanding. I haven't double checked it, so I really want to be careful on these shows. But it is my understanding from reading somebody recently that the Texas gold has been refused. Let me see if I can Google it real fast.
Oh, wow. Just you can buy the gold. You give us all your money, but you can never look at it, physically take it or anything. It's just our money, and we're going to tell you it's there. Isn't that wonderful? And we should, of course, trust them because they're very trustworthy, right?
Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for doing this last minute interview with me, especially because that really I had read a little bit about it, and the fact that the Federal Reserve is coming outright and saying we will go Cyprus in the U.S. if needed, and we pretty much know it will be needed because the Fed's printing how many billion? What is it? 85 billion a month or something, and it's all to support. It's a bailout of the banks, constant for the mortgage MBSs. And so we know it's all fake. And pretty much, I really wish people would listen to you and so many others and buy gold and silver. And I will also tell everybody, David has a great report. It is in depth. It is about, just like he mentions, he's calling Monday in the largest refinery in Europe. He does his research. He does all the things needed to make you informed and know what's really going on with silver. And he will not speculate to high end about this or that. It's the truth, it's the facts. And so I highly advise everybody going to silverinvestor.com and signing up and subscribing with David. He really does have great information, not just on physical, but also on the mines and gold. And so, David, thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And of course, we do our best. We do make errors like anybody, but yeah, we do try to really stay objective as we possibly can in this domain. So thank you for that.
All right, you have an awesome day, and I will be talking to you again.
Great. Thank you, Sherry.
This has been Sherry.